It was Bruce Kelly's wish to be cremated, his ashes scattered in Sydney Harbour. Like all his final wishes, it was written in a neat hand and altered recreationally in the final months of his life, whenever he had fought with one of his relatives, or whenever he hadn't fought with them and was growing bored by peace. At the time of his death, he had also stipulated a private burial, family only, and a more public funeral service. The latter was to be hosted at his home. A clear winter's day. Guests arrived at the Kelly residence with raw cheeks and shawls askew. While the men removed their coats, their wives pretended to admire the white lilies that adorned the hallway so they might better see through to the mirror that hung behind. Peeping between petals, they flattened their hair. The wind was aptly dramatic. It bent heads until they bowed as if in grief, and slammed doors portentously. But from the comfort of the Kellys' family home, the weather seemed to mock them. In the kitchen, the sunlight was relentlessly benevolent. It ravished the marble surfaces until they cried out and shone. It set the champagne flutes twinkling, yet somehow stopped short of getting in anyone's eye. And in the living room just beyond, where the heater was on and the windows were double glazed, the wind was impossible to feel. They could only see it, in the lawn which looked freshly polished, and in the leaves which danced in the trees. As she surveyed her setup, Bruce Kelly's widow, Vanessa, wished she hadn't thrown herself into the preparations with quite so much vigour. Every surface had been cleared, Bruce's pill tray thrown away, the masses of condolence bouquets out of sight in an upstairs bedroom. The furniture, too, had been rearranged. The motorised armchair, which usually sat in morbid proximity to the TV, was inconspicuous in the corner, its back against the wall. The shadow of it still stained the floorboards, beneath a row of rented fold-out chairs. Vanessa feared she had, without intending to, set the scene for a party. A celebration of life, the invitations read, but that didn't mean it actually ought to be fun. She was right. Solemnity would elude them all day. At first the mood was festive, almost frivolous, and then, when drama eventuated, it was not in a sombre, reflective vein. It came instead with flashing lights and sirens. It was inevitable, given Bruce Kelly's age, that his funeral would feel like a reunion. If he had been young enough to still be working full-time, or old enough to be fully retired, then his mourners may have been familiar with each other, either from an office or from a regular funeral circuit. Instead, dying at the inconvenient age of 77, he managed to assemble under one roof a great many people who had not seen each other in several years. For his peers, Bruce's death was a blow. It knocked their lives into perspective. For the first time, they had to admit to themselves that they had arrived at late middle age, perhaps even had arrived there some time ago. The water was rising. And so they opted for overt displays of vivacity. Booming greetings, pumping handshakes, telling each other that they hadn't aged a day, although privately they thought the changes were alarming. Even the younger generation was caught up in a flurry of reconnection. Bruce's two daughters, Skye and Annika, were surrounded by friends they hadn't seen in years, people they'd grown up with who had since scattered across the world, people who'd returned today because they could remember, as only old friends can, who Bruce Kelly's daughters were before they'd had a chance at self-invention, when they were, first and foremost, the children of their parents. In the back corner of the room, trapped within a punishing shaft of light, two women of about 30 were conducting one such conversation. One, Cass, was a friend of the family. The other was Skye Kelly, Bruce's eldest daughter. With a white father and a Chinese mother, Skye had inherited none of her late father's looks, but much of his personality. "The whole thing's fucked," she was saying now. Cass gripped her tighter. "And with your wedding and everything, what terrible timing." "Well, there's never a good time for your dad to die." "Of course not." Cass felt chastened. She had approached Skye bearing a sombre, "I'm sorry for your loss." But then Skye had hugged her with such warmth and squealed at such a pitch that Cass had immediately adopted a tone better suited to gossip than to condolences.